Welcome to our deep dive into the world of pi. I mean, we all know it's 3.14159 and all that from school, but we've got articles and research here that show how deep it really goes.
Yeah.
Like pi is popping up everywhere. Geometry, obviously, but also statistics, physics, even music theory.
It's true.
It's like pi is some kind of secret code of the universe.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to crack it wide open today.
I think what always gets me is that pi's story goes back thousands of years,
Yeah.
long before modern mathematics even existed.
I never thought about it like that.
It makes you wonder what made those early civilizations try to figure out this ratio.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What drove them to do that?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like they had calculators or computers.
No.
Like, what did those early estimates even look like? Were they just like throwing darts at a board?
Not quite, but given the tools they had, it's pretty impressive what they came up with. We've got like the Rhind papyrus here from ancient Egypt goes all the way back to 1650 BC. It has this formula for the area of a circle that implies a pi value of about 3.16.
Not bad for almost 4,000 years ago.
Right.
So were they like using this for practical stuff back then? Like building pyramids or was it more about the stars and like, the cosmos?
It seems like it was both, actually.
Oh, wow.
They needed pi for things like building, surveying land, even predicting the movements of the stars. But it also shows that they were grappling with this concept, this idea that would become super important to math.
Totally.
Centuries later.
It's kind of wild to think about those early mathematicians.
I know.
Like just looking up at the sky or building these massive structures and realizing that there's this underlying mathematical truth that's connecting it all.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about the Egyptians, what about other ancient cultures?
Oh, yeah.
Did anybody else try to figure out pi?
Absolutely. So the Babylonians around the same time estimated pi to be 258, which is basically 3.125.
Okay.
And they recorded it on a clay tablet. Oh, wow.
I mean, just imagine that this piece of clay is holding this huge, important piece of mathematical history.
That's amazing. So even back then, we had different civilizations all trying to figure out this ratio.
Yeah.
But how did we go from those early approximations to the pi that we use today?
That's a good question.
Was it like a slow, steady process, or were there like huge leaps forward?
Well, there was definitely a period where things were kind of quiet on the pi front, in Europe at least.
Okay.
But over in China, things were really heating up.
Uh-oh.
Chinese mathematicians were making some serious progress in calculating pi.
Interesting.
We've got Liu Hui in the 3rd century AD. He developed these really sophisticated iterative algorithms.
Hold on, iterative algorithms.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty high tech for the 3rd century. What were they actually doing?
So think of it like a recipe where you keep refining the ingredients to get closer and closer to the perfect flavor.
I like that.
So in this case, the flavor is the true value of pi.
Liu Hui was using polygons similar to what the Greeks had done, but he figured out a way to keep repeating the process with more and more sides.
Oh, I see.
Leading to super accurate results, and his work really laid the groundwork for so many later breakthroughs.
So it's like they were building on the knowledge of those who came before them?
Exactly.
Constantly improving the recipe.
Yeah.
I'm sensing a pattern here.
Yeah, there's definitely the thread there.
So what happened after Liu Hui? Did the Chinese mathematicians keep dominating the pi game?
They definitely had a golden age.
Cool.
We can't forget Zhu Chongzi, who lived around 480 AD.
Okay.
He calculated pi to 7 decimal places.
Wow.
Can you imagine the dedication it took to get that level of precision without modern tools?
It's mind-blowing.
And his record stood for 800 years.
Wow. It really makes you wonder what else they might have achieved if they had the technology that we have today.
Right.
So we've got the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Chinese. Were there any other players in this ancient pi pursuit?
There's one more crucial contribution we can't leave out.
Okay.
Indian mathematician Madhava in the 14th and 15th centuries.
Okay.
He made some groundbreaking advancements using infinite series to calculate pi. And this was a really radical shift in thinking.
Yeah.
Moving away from purely geometric approaches.
Right.
And it really laid the foundation for a whole new era of pi exploration.
Infinite series. Okay, now we're getting into some serious math territory.
Yeah.
This is where things start to get really interesting.
Right.
Should we jump into this mathematical revolution and see how infinite series changed the game?
Let's do it. It's a journey that'll take us from ancient civilizations to the cutting edge of modern mathematics.
I'm ready.
Me too. What's so fascinating about this period, the 16th and 17th centuries, is that it wasn't just refining calculations. It was a total shift in how we even thought about pi. Mathematicians started seeing it less as a geometric problem and more like a puzzle that you could solve with these new tools like infinite series.
Okay, I gotta admit, infinite series sounds kind of intimidating.
I know, it's a mouthful.
Can you break that down for me and for our listeners who maybe aren't, professional mathematicians?
Sure.
What does that even mean, and how did it, revolutionize the way we calculate pi?
Okay, so imagine you're adding up an endless line of numbers.
Okay.
That's basically what an infinite series is.
Right.
It might seem counterintuitive, but sometimes those infinite sums can actually converge to a specific value, and it turns out some of those series lead us directly to pi.
Wait, so you're telling me that by adding up an endless string of numbers, you can get closer and closer to pi?
Exactly.
That's incredible. It's like finding a hidden pathway in a vast mathematical jungle or something.
It is. And there were a lot of explorers forging this new path.
Who were some of the big names?
Oh, we've got a whole bunch of math superstars here. Viet Wallace, Gregory Leibniz.
Wow.
They all developed these groundbreaking formulas using infinite series that could be used to calculate pi with unbelievable accuracy.
It sounds like there was a real sense of excitement and competition back then.
Oh, absolutely.
Like everybody was racing to find the best formula for pi.
Yeah. As these new tools emerged, everyone wanted to push the limits of what was possible.
Totally.
It's like each new formula was a more powerful telescope, allowing us to see pi more and more clearly.
I love that analogy. And I've heard that even Isaac Newton himself got in on the pi action. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Newton, being the genius he was, couldn't resist diving into the world of pi.
Of course not.
He used something called an arcsine series to calculate pi to 15 digits. And remember, this was all done by hand.
15 digits by hand. I can barely remember my own phone number. It's amazing. But speaking of technology, a few centuries later, computers enter the scene.
Right.
How did that change the game?
Well, those early computers like ENIAC in the 1940s were already so much faster than humans at crunching numbers.
Yeah.
Even the most brilliant mathematicians couldn't keep up with the raw power of these machines.
Right.
John Wrench and Levi Smith used a desk calculator to calculate 11,120 digits of pi in 1949.
Okay.
But then ENIAC, using an arctangent series, calculated 2,037 digits in just 70 hours.
Oh, wow. So did computers just make human mathematicians obsolete in the quest for pi?
Not at all.
Okay.
Human ingenuity was still key. Mathematicians didn't just give up.
Right.
They saw computers as powerful allies.
I see.
So they started developing even more sophisticated algorithms and formulas specifically designed to work with these increasingly powerful computers.
That's cool.
It was like a whole new era of collaboration was born.
A human-computer pi dream team. So what were some of those faster algorithms that came out of this partnership?
One of the most powerful types of algorithms is called iterative algorithms.
Okay.
These don't use infinite series, but instead use this repeating process that gets closer to the true value of pi with each step.
Oh, interesting.
It's like you're polishing a rough gemstone over and over again until it's totally perfect.
I like that. So each repetition, each iteration gets you closer to that perfect pi gem.
Exactly.
But honestly, why would anyone need millions or even billions of digits of pi? Isn't a few decimal places enough for practical stuff?
You're right. For most practical purposes, like building a bridge or launching a rocket.
Right.
A handful of digits is plenty.
Okay.
But calculating pi to extreme precision goes beyond those practical applications.
I see.
It's about pushing the boundaries of knowledge, testing the limits of both human ingenuity and the power of computers.
So it's about the challenge, the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake.
Exactly.
I could definitely respect it. It's like climbing Mount Everest. You don't need to do it.
Right.
But the achievement itself is pretty amazing.
Exactly. And these pi computations actually have other benefits, too.
Oh, really?
They help us test and refine supercomputers.
Okay.
They help us find patterns in seemingly random sequences and even gain a deepened understanding of the nature of pi itself.
Okay, so there's more to it than just showing off.
Right.
So if pi is so fundamental to the universe, wouldn't understanding it at this incredibly deep level reveal something super profound about reality itself?
That's what makes it so exciting. Every new algorithm could be a clue to something bigger. Right. It's like we're peeling back the layers of a cosmic onion, and pi might just be at the very heart of it all.
This deep dive is getting pretty deep. But before we get lost in the cosmos, I want to hear about this pi room in Paris.
Oh, yes.
You mentioned earlier.
The pi room at the Palais de la Découverte.
Yeah.
It's a testament to our fascination with pi.
Okay.
It has 707 digits of pi inscribed on the wall. It's a really beautiful sight.
Oh.
But there's a twist.
Ooh, I love a good twist. What is it?
Well, these digits were painstakingly calculated by hand by William Shanks in the 19th century.
Okay.
He devoted years of his life to the task.
Wow.
But it turns out he made a mistake in the 528th digit.
Oh, no.
And all the digits after that were wrong.
So even with all that dedication, a tiny error threw off the whole calculation.
Yeah. It's kind of tragic, but also kind of funny.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even the greatest minds are human.
Right.
And the pursuit of knowledge is this ongoing process full of surprises and even mistakes sometimes.
It's a good reminder that we should never take our knowledge for granted.
Exactly.
There's always more to learn, and even the things we think we know for sure can be challenged and changed.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've gone from ancient approximations to infinite series to computers cranking out trillions of digits.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It's clear that pi has a fascinating history. But what about its significance beyond geometry? Why does it keep showing up in other fields like statistics and physics?
That's a great question.
It's like it's haunting me, in a good way, of course.
Well, that's where pi starts to feel almost mystical. It's like it's embedded in the very fabric of the universe, connecting things that seem totally unrelated. It's this hidden code just waiting to be deciphered.
Okay, you've definitely got me hooked. Where do we even begin to unpack pi's role outside the world of circles and geometry? It's like what you're saying is pi is the secret ingredient in the recipe of the universe.
Well, one fascinating example is Euler's solution to the Basel problem back in 1735.
Okay.
It was this puzzle that had stumped mathematicians for ages, trying to figure out the exact value of the sum of the reciprocals of squares.
Okay.
Like, 11 Manawala plus 12 metal plus 13 nettle and so on forever.
Yeah.
Seems kind of random, right?
Yeah, it does.
But Euler cracked the code and found that the answer to this infinite sum equals pi divided by 6.
Hold on. So you're telling me that pi, this thing we know from circles, is somehow baked into the very nature of numbers themselves.
Exactly.
I mean, what does that even mean?
It's a really deep connection, showing us that pi isn't just about measuring shapes.
Right.
It's like woven into the fabric of number theory.
Yeah.
It's like finding a secret tunnel that connects two seemingly separate buildings.
I like that.
And the connections don't stop there.
Oh, no.
Pi also pops up in physics.
Really?
Especially in the equations that describe, the fundamental laws of the universe.
Okay, now I really need an example. Like, how can pi be in laws that govern the universe?
Okay, well, take Heisenberg's uncertainty principle from quantum mechanics.
Okay.
It basically says that there's a limit to how precisely we can know both a particle's position and its momentum at the same time.
I'm with you.
It's kind of like trying to nail down a shadow.
Oh.
The more you focus on one aspect, the more elusive the other one becomes.
I see, yeah.
And guess what? Pi is right there in the equation, setting that fundamental limit on how much we can know about the universe.
So pi is not just about shapes and numbers.
No.
It's literally woven into the fabric of reality itself.
It is.
This is blowing my mind.
It's pretty amazing, right? And there's more.
All right.
Pi is also super important in probability and statistics.
Really?
Think about the bell curve, the one that describes the normal distribution.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, from test scores to people's heights.
Right.
Well, pi is a key part of the formula that makes sure the area under that curve equals 1.
Oh, why?
Which is essential for calculating probabilities.
So from the subatomic world of quantum mechanics to the way data's distributed pi is there,
right,
working its magic behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
I feel like we're only scratching the surface of what pi can tell us about the universe.
I think you're right.
We haven't even talked about its influence on, popular culture.
Oh, that's right. There's Pi Day, of course, celebrated on March 14th.
Of course.
There's all kinds of Pi-inspired art and music, people memorizing thousands and thousands of digits of pi.
It's true. It's become a cultural icon almost.
It has, a symbol of the beauty and the mystery of mathematics.
It is kind of incredible how this number that starts with something as simple as a circle has captured the imagination of so many people.
For centuries.
That's amazing.
It really speaks to that desire, that humans have to find patterns and meaning in the world around us.
Right.
And pi, with its infinite, never-ending decimal expansion, kind of embodies both that order and the vastness of the universe.
Okay, I'm officially full of pie facts.
I can tell.
And just mind-blown moments. Thank you for taking us on this incredible journey.
It's been my pleasure.
But before we go, here's something I want everyone listening to think about.
Okay.
If pi is woven into all these different areas of math and science, does that mean there's some deeper principle connecting everything? What other secrets is pi hiding, just waiting for us to discover them?
That's a great question, and I don't have the answer.
Me neither, but I'm definitely going to be seeing pi everywhere now.
I think we all will.
It's not just a number, it's like a key that unlocks a whole new way of seeing the world.
And that's the beauty of exploration. You never know where a simple question, a basic concept might lead you.
That's so true. And with pi, the journey's just beginning.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us on this mathematical adventure into the world of pi. Go out there, explore, and maybe celebrate Pi Day with a slice of your favorite pie.
That's a good idea.
You never know what insights might be waiting around the corner.
All right, so we're diving into Carmen today, and I bet everyone knows that super famous habanera tune, Love is a Rebellious Bird. That one.
Absolutely a classic.
Yeah, but get this. When it premiered in Paris back in 1875, audiences were completely scandalized.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how something so popular now was like a total shocker back then.
So what exactly made it so scandalous to, those Parisian opera goers back then?
Well, think about it. This was the world of French opera in the 1870s, and then you have this fiery, totally independent Romani woman as the main character.
Carmen.
Exactly, Carmen. And she's just defying all these societal expectations, living life on her own terms. And it was a huge departure from the typical, the virtuous heroines you usually see in operas.
Yeah, I get it now. It was a pretty bold move for Bizet to put a character like that on stage, especially back then.
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't just her independence either. Carmen embraced her sexuality in a way that was really groundbreaking for the time.
And I guess that kind of frankness wouldn't have gone over well with a more, conservative audience.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And you also have to consider the setting of the opera, like Seville streets, the world of smugglers and soldiers.
Right. It's all very down to earth.
Exactly. A far cry from the more fantastical or historical settings that were common in French opera at the time.
So Bizet is ripping the curtains off and showing this slice of life that audiences weren't used to seeing in the opera house. I can see why they'd be shocked.
For sure. But it wasn't just the story. Bizet's music was also pretty innovative, especially with those Spanish influences, like those flamenco rhythms.
So he's really pushing boundaries on multiple levels.
He really was. But you know what really sent those audiences over the edge?
Don't tell me the tragic ending.
The tragic ending. That's right. I mean, we all know Carmen doesn't just, fade away or die of some, romantic illness. She gets stabbed on stage.
Talk about a dramatic exit.
Right. And that was totally unheard of in French opera at the time, like a violent death on stage. Way too graphic, too real for the refined Parisian crowd.
Wow. They were probably shielding their eyes.
I wouldn't be surprised. But even though it was shocking, it was also powerful. It made a statement.
It definitely makes you think about Carmen's defiance, right? Even in death, she's choosing her own fate. In a way, it's almost like a proto-feminist statement, challenging that whole idea that women should just be passive.
That's a really interesting point. And I think that's part of why Carmen still resonates so strongly with audiences today.
Yeah, for sure. Those themes of freedom and societal expectations, they're just as relevant now as they were back then.
Absolutely. And Bizet doesn't just present them, superficially. He weaves them into the music itself, using all these techniques to really bring the drama to life.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. I have to admit, I'm one of those people who has the habanera stuck in my head, but I haven't really dug deeper into the music.
Well, let's unpack that habanera then. It's not just catchy, It's incredibly clever. The way that melody kind of snakes around those shifting harmonies, it creates this feeling of unease, like something's bubbling under the surface.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like the music itself is embodying Carmen's rebellious spirit, her refusal to just fit in.
Exactly. And it's not just the melody. Bizet uses the orchestra to amplify that drama, too. That repeating rhythmic figure, the ostinato. It creates this sense of inevitability, like Carmen's fate is already sealed.
Chills. Just thinking about it. It's incredible how much he's packing into every single note.
And that's just scratching the surface. He uses leitmotifs, too.
Yeah.
Those recurring musical themes that represent different characters or ideas. So every time you hear a specific melody, it's like a signpost guiding you through the emotional landscape of the opera.
So there's even more to discover. I'm starting to see why it's a masterpiece. But I also have to ask, if it was so groundbreaking, so musically sophisticated, why was it such a flop when it first premiered? Was it just the scandal factor, or was there something else going on?
Well, the scandal definitely played a role. But there's more to the story than that. Let's dig into that a little bit, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's more to it than just the scandal. I think it's important to remember what opera comique was like in the 1870s.
Right. Carmen is considered an opera comique, isn't it?
It is. But back then, opera comique was generally much lighter. Think romantic comedies or like witty satires with spoken dialogue mixed in with the music.
Okay, so not exactly what you'd expect from a story like Carmen.
Not at all. Audiences were expecting something fun and lighthearted, and instead they got this like really dark and intense story with a tragic ending. It was like showing up for a picnic and finding out you're at a funeral.
No wonder they were scandalized. But do you think there were other reasons why it flopped? I mean, besides the audience's expectations, were there any critical reviews that really slammed the opera?
Oh, there were definitely some critics who just hated it. Some thought the music was way too dissonant, too much like Wagner.
Wagner, that's a whole other deep dive, right?
Right. Yeah, a whole other story. But yeah, Wagner was this huge controversial figure at the time. And some critics thought Bizet was trying to be too much like him, too avant-garde.
Like he was shaking up the French musical establishment a little too much.
Exactly. And then there were those who just found the whole subject matter, morally objectionable.
Because of Carmen's lifestyle.
Exactly. They thought she was a bad influence.
Yeah.
A threat to good morals and all that.
Wow. So they weren't ready for a character like Carmen.
Not really. It's amazing how a single work of art can be so polarizing, right?
Yeah, it really makes you think about how art reflects the values of its time. But even with all the scandal and the criticism, Carmen eventually became a huge success. How did that happen? Was there a specific moment, or was it more gradual?
Well, sadly, it happened after Bizet died. You see, he died really young, just 3 months after the premiere.
Oh, wow. So he never got to see his opera become famous.
No, he didn't. But after his death, there was a production in Vienna. And Bizet's friend, Ernest Carra, he adapted the opera, replacing the spoken dialogue with recitatives.
So he turned it into a more traditional grand opera format.
Exactly. And that made it a lot more acceptable to audiences who were used to that style.
Interesting. So the things that made Carmen so groundbreaking, the realism, the spoken dialogue, the gritty subject matter, those were the very things that got toned down so it could be successful.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Makes you wonder if Bizet would have been happy with those changes.
Yeah, I mean, would he have preferred his original vision even if it wasn't a hit? Who knows? But what matters is that Carmen eventually found its audience and people connected with it in a really powerful way. What do you think it is about this opera, even in its changed form, that captivates people so much?
I think it's a combination of things. First of all, Bizet's music is just incredible. Those melodies get stuck in your head and they stay there. And the story itself is so compelling. A passionate love story with a tragic ending set in this, exotic location.
Yeah, there's something about those tragic love stories that just gets to us.
Definitely. And the characters themselves are so vivid and memorable. Carmen is such a force of nature. And Don Jose, even though he's flawed, you can't help but feel for him. Caught between duty and desire, and ultimately driven to desperation by his love for Carmen.
They're both such interesting characters, and the way Bizet uses music to show their inner struggles is just brilliant.
Absolutely. It's like he's giving us a window into their souls.
So we're talking about an opera that flopped at its premiere, and now it's one of the most popular operas in the world. Why do you think it's had such staying power?
Well, I think part of it is the universality of the themes.
Yeah.
Love, loss, jealousy, betrayal. These are emotions that everyone experiences no matter what their culture or background is.
Right. Those themes are timeless.
Exactly. And as we talked about earlier, Carmen also raises these really important questions about societal expectations and gender roles and what happens when people choose to break free from those roles.
It's like Carmen is holding up a mirror to society and making us confront these issues.
I think so. And it does it in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
And the music itself is so powerful. It really heightens the drama and draws you into the story.
Absolutely. Opera has this unique ability to connect with us on an emotional level. It bypasses our intellectual defenses and just goes straight for the heart.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's probably why Carmen is still so relevant today. It's not just a historical artifact, it's a living, breathing work of art that speaks to us on a personal level.
It really does. And it's
Mm.
so visually stunning, too.
Yeah.
The costumes, the sets, the choreography.
Hmm.
It's a feast for the senses.
Speaking of visuals, I'm curious about how Carmen has been staged over the years. I know there have been countless productions, each with its own interpretation of the story. What are some of the more interesting or unconventional approaches you've seen?
Oh, there have been some really wild ones. Some directors have set it in modern times, like exploring how the themes play out in contemporary setting. Others have focused on the psychological aspects of the story, really digging into the characters' motivations. And some have taken a more abstract approach, using dance and movement and visual imagery to create this really stylized interpretation.
Wow, so many different ways to tell the same story. It's amazing how a single work of art can inspire so much creativity. I'm especially intrigued by the idea of setting Carmen in a modern context. Can you give me an example of how that's been done?
Sure. There was this one production by the English National Opera that set Carmen in a 1970s trailer park in the American South.
A trailer park. That's a bold choice.
It was, and it really worked. Carmen became this fiercely independent single mother struggling to survive, and Don Jose was a Vietnam War veteran dealing with PTSD.
Wow, so it brought in all these new layers of meaning about poverty and social marginalization and the trauma of war.
Exactly. It showed how those themes of freedom and fate and the destructive power of passion are universal. They can be applied to any time and place.
It's like Carmen is this chameleon. It can adapt to different environments and take on new meanings depending on the context.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that adaptability is a big part of why Carmen is such a masterpiece. It's a work of art that can be constantly reinterpreted and rediscovered, and it always has something new to offer.
Yeah. It's a reminder that great storytelling never gets old. One thing we haven't talked about yet is Carmen's portrayal as a Romani woman. That's something that I think deserves a closer look.
Absolutely. It's a really important topic and one that's been the subject of a lot of debate over the years. On the one hand, Carmen has been praised for its portrayal of Romani culture, the music, the dance
And
traditions.
Carmen herself is such a strong and independent character.
Exactly. But on the other hand, some people have criticized the opera for perpetuating negative stereotypes about Romani people, like being seductive or deceitful or prone to violence.
Right, those are harmful stereotypes that have been used to justify discrimination against Romani people for centuries.
Exactly. And it's a valid concern. I mean, we have to be mindful of the potential for harm when we're dealing with these kinds of representations.
Yeah.
So it's a complex issue. Carmen is this incredible work of art, but it also exists within this larger historical context of prejudice and discrimination against Romani people.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we always need to be critical and thoughtful when we're engaging with art, especially art that deals with sensitive topics. So how do modern productions navigate this issue? Are there any efforts to address these concerns and present a more nuanced portrayal of Carmen and the Romani community?
Yeah, definitely. There's been a lot more awareness of these issues in recent years, and many directors and performers are really trying to be more sensitive and responsible in their portrayals.
That's good to hear. So how are they doing that? What kind of changes are being made?
Well, for one thing, many productions are now working closely with Romani cultural consultants to make sure that their portrayals are authentic and respectful.
So they're bringing in experts to provide guidance and ensure accuracy.
Exactly. They're also having conversations with Romani communities about their concerns and how they feel they've been represented in the past.
So it's a collaborative process.
It is. And some productions are even going a step further and using Carmen as a platform to challenge those stereotypes and raise awareness about the issues faced by Romani communities.
That's fantastic. It's great to see that the opera world is taking these issues seriously and trying to do better.
It's definitely a step in the right direction. And it shows how art can be a force for positive change.
Yeah.
It can spark conversations and challenge our assumptions and help us to see the world from different perspectives.
I love that idea that art can be a catalyst for change. It's not just about entertainment, it's about reflection and growth.
Exactly. And Carmen, I think, is a perfect example of that. It's a work of art that continues to challenge us and provoke us and make us think about the world in new ways.
It's amazing how much there is to unpack with Carmen, right? Like, it's this opera from the 1800s, but it still feels so relevant today.
Yeah, Bizet really tapped into some timeless themes with this one. Love, freedom, societal expectations, fate. Those are things we're still grappling with today.
I know we talked about it before, but the idea of fate in Carmen really sticks with me. It's like all these characters are caught in this web they just can't escape.
It's true. There's this sense of inevitability that runs through the whole opera, and Bizet actually uses music to reinforce that feeling. Have you ever noticed that kind of dark, descending phrase that keeps popping up in the score?
You mean like a recurring musical theme?
Yeah, exactly. It's often called the fate motif. And every time you hear it, it's like a little reminder that tragedy is just around the corner.
It's like he's giving us these musical hints that things aren't going to end well.
Exactly. And the character's actions sort of play into the feeling of predestination, too. Take Carmen, for example. She's so determined to live life on her own terms. She's always defying expectations.
But it's almost like her defiance is what seals her fate.
That's the paradox, isn't it? By refusing to conform, by choosing her own path, she ends up setting the tragedy in motion.
And Don Jose, he's so obsessed with Carmen, so desperate to control her that he ends up destroying both of them?
It's like they're both caught in this downward spiral and they just can't break free.
It's pretty heavy stuff. But I think that's why Carmen continues to resonate with people. It makes us think about these big questions, like, do we really have free will or are we all just playing out our destinies?
It definitely challenges us to think about those things. And I think that's part of what makes it such a powerful work of art. It's not just entertainment. It's a philosophical exploration of the human condition.
So what's the takeaway for us as listeners? Why should we care about Carmen in the 21st century?
I think Carmen gives us this opportunity to reflect on our own lives. It encourages us to think about our relationships, our desires, the choices we make in the face of societal pressure.
It reminds us that love can be beautiful but also destructive, that freedom can come at a cost, and that sometimes we just can't escape the consequences of our actions.
That's true. But it also celebrates the human spirit, our capacity for love and joy and rebellion, even in the face of tragedy.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. It's about embracing the complexities of life, the good and the bad.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive into Carmen has been incredible. I've learned so much, and I definitely have a new appreciation for this opera.
It's been a pleasure exploring it with you.
So as we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything our listeners should keep in mind?
Just that Carmen is a work of art that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
The more you explore it, the more you discover. And I think everyone should experience it for themselves, at least once.
I agree. And there's so many ways to experience it, too. You can see a live performance, listen to a recording, watch a film adaptation. And if you're feeling really adventurous, you could even check out that hip-opera version.
That's right. There's a Carmen out there for everyone.
So go out there and explore. And let us know what you think.
Until next time, happy listening.
All right, let's dive into Petra, a city carved right into those Jordanian sandstone cliffs.
Wow.
You sent us some really interesting stuff from the Petra Wikipedia page.
Yep.
You're clearly as fascinated by this lost city as we are, and honestly, who wouldn't be?
Yeah.
It's a place full of empires, innovation, and a civilization that just thrived against all odds. We're going to take a journey through time here, peel back all those layers of history to see how Petra rose, how it fell, and the echoes that we still see today. To guide us through this ancient world, we have our expert in deciphering the past.
Well, Petra, it's a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
It's not just these impressive ruins.
Right.
It's about a civilization that turned this harsh desert landscape into this flourishing hub.
Yeah.
It challenges what we think is possible.
It really does. And the architects of this whole marvel, the Nabateans,
Yeah.
They weren't just desert dwellers. They were masters of their environment.
Right.
I mean, for most, the desert would be like a barrier. But for them, it became a strategic advantage.
Yeah.
Think about it. I mean, they were up against empires like the Romans.
Oh, yeah.
Yet they held their own for centuries.
For centuries.
A lot of that goes back to their ingenuity, especially with water.
That's key.
We're not just talking basic wells here.
No.
So paint us a picture. How did they turn this desert into an oasis?
Okay, so imagine this system of dams, cisterns, and these channels. It was so sophisticated.
Wow.
They could collect and distribute rainwater through the entire city.
Wow.
They even carved channels into the rock faces. just to direct the flow of water.
That's incredible.
This wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving.
Yeah.
Agriculture, vineyards, orchards, gardens.
Wow.
All in the middle of the desert.
It's almost like they were playing a totally different game. While others struggled to find water.
Right.
The Nabateans, they had mastered manipulating it and using it to their advantage.
Absolutely. And don't forget the strategic advantage it gave them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Their enemies, they didn't know the desert.
Right.
They were constantly at a disadvantage.
Totally.
The Nabateans could just disappear. Oof, gone. Using their knowledge of these hidden water sources and passages to outmaneuver everyone.
Wow. It's like they turned the desert itself into a weapon, but their brilliance, it wasn't just water management.
Yeah.
They were incredible architects. The way they blended their own style with influences from other cultures is just fascinating.
Absolutely.
Like the Sick.
Yeah, the Sick.
The narrow gorge that serves as the dramatic entrance to Petra.
The entrance.
It's a natural wonder, enhanced by the Nabateans. They carved channels and smoothed the pathway, making it both awe-inspiring and practical.
They were smart.
I've seen pictures, but I can only imagine that feeling of walking through that narrow passage.
Oh, yeah.
With the towering sandstone walls closing in on both sides. It's got to be like stepping into another world.
It really is. And then at the end of this winding path, imagine emerging into a hidden valley and then, bam, the treasury, Al-Khazna.
Oh, wow.
It's not just a building.
Right.
It's this entire facade carved into the sheer rock face.
Yeah.
It's a fusion of architectural styles that tells a story of cultural exchange and adaptation.
We got to talk about those Hellenistic influences. I mean, it's amazing to think about this desert civilization being connected to ancient Greece.
Remember, the Nabateans, they weren't isolated.
Right.
They were major players in the trade routes that spanned, the ancient world.
Yeah.
Their kingdom was a crossroads. It was a place where goods, ideas, and those architectural styles flowed freely.
Right.
Think of Alexandria, like a bustling port city with those grand buildings, with the iconic columns, pediments, and just a sense of grandeur that seems to defy gravity.
Right, right.
The Nabateans, they saw that through their trade, their interactions with the Greeks. They incorporated those elements into their own designs.
So it's not just about copying.
Right.
It's about taking inspiration.
Yeah.
Transforming it into something uniquely their own.
Precisely. The treasury, for example, it features that classic broken pediment and a central tholos.
Right.
Both hallmarks of Hellenistic architecture. But look closer. You'll see those subtle Nabatean touches.
Okay.
Those intricate carvings and decorative elements. They speak to their own traditions.
Right.
It's a dialogue between cultures.
Yeah.
A fusion that creates something totally new.
It's like they took the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Made it their own. And we see this blending of styles in other structures, like the monastery, right?
Yeah, exactly. The monastery, it's even bigger than the treasury.
Wow.
And more remote. It echoes those Hellenistic principles, but also introduces more distinctly Nabatean elements. It's like their architectural language is evolving. It's a testament to their willingness to adapt and innovate, but still honor their own culture.
It makes you wonder what their city looked like in its prime.
Right.
All of these incredible structures, bustling markets, traders coming in from all over.
Yeah.
It must have been incredible.
It must have been a sight to behold. But like all great civilizations, the Nabateans eventually faced challenges,
Yeah.
It tested their resilience, their ingenuity.
I'm guessing the Romans play a role here.
They do.
Yeah.
In 106 AD, the Roman Empire, they were always eager to expand.
Of course.
They annexed the Nabatean kingdom, absorbing Petra into their huge empire. While this wasn't like an immediate downfall,
right.
It was a turning point for Petra.
So the Romans, they arrive on the scene. Did they just waltz in and take over? Or was it more gradual?
It was kind of both. The Nabateans, they'd already been dealing with the Romans for decades.
Yeah.
Negotiating treaties, navigating that whole web of, alliances and rivalries.
Right, right.
The annexation itself, it wasn't a violent takeover.
Okay.
But more like a strategic move by the Romans to solidify their control over those vital trade routes.
It's interesting. The Nabateans, they seem to be masters of playing that long game.
Absolutely.
Adapting to the changing political landscape.
They were pragmatists.
Yeah.
Always looking for ways to maintain their independence and their prosperity. Even under Roman rule, Petra, it continued to thrive.
Yeah.
For a time.
Okay.
But the empire's embrace, it kind of sowed the seeds of its eventual decline.
How so? Did the Romans neglect Petra or impose harsh taxes that crippled the economy?
It was more about those changing currents of global trade, the rise of sea routes, particularly those connecting the East and West.
Yeah.
They offered a faster and more efficient alternative to those overland routes that Petra controlled. The incense trade. That was the lifeblood of their economy.
Yeah.
It began to bypass Petra, flowing through new channels.
It's like the world was shifting around them, and Petra, despite all its ingenuity and resilience, just couldn't escape the impact of those global forces.
Exactly. And then as if economic decline wasn't enough, a devastating earthquake hit Petra in 363 AD. Imagine the city already weakened.
Oh, wow.
Shaken to its core. Much of the infrastructure, including those water management systems, they were severely damaged.
That's a double whammy: declining economy,
right,
and a natural disaster of epic proportions.
It was.
It's hard to imagine a city surviving that.
It was a blow Petra never fully recovered from.
Yeah.
There were attempts to rebuild and restore.
Right.
But Petra's glory days, they were over. It entered a long period of decline, eventually fading, slipping into obscurity.
It's almost poetic in a way. A city that rose from the desert, defying the odds, just to be brought down by forces outside its control. But as we know, Petra didn't completely vanish. Right. It was rediscovered, and it captured the world's imagination.
And that rediscovery, that's a tale worthy of like an adventure novel.
Yeah.
Imagine this Swiss explorer, Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, driven by a thirst for knowledge.
Okay.
Fascinated by the ancient world, venturing into the heart of the Middle East, early 19th century.
So he just stumbled upon Petra by chance, or was he looking for it specifically?
Burckhardt, he'd heard these rumors and whispers of lost city hidden somewhere in the Jordanian desert.
Right.
But finding it, that was no easy feat.
I bet.
He had to travel in disguise, posing as a Muslim pilgrim.
Wow.
Navigating treacherous terrain, relying on local guides, and they weren't, always eager to reveal the city's secrets.
It sounds like something out of Indiana Jones. Did he actually find what he was looking for?
He did in 1812.
Wow.
Through luck, persistence, and a bit of cunning, Burckhardt found himself, standing before the treasury, just awestruck by its grandeur.
Yeah.
And the sheer audacity of its construction.
Wow.
His rediscovery, it brought Petra back into the Western world's consciousness,
right,
sparking this wave of fascination and exploration that still continues to this day.
It's amazing to think that a city could stay hidden for centuries.
I know.
Only to be rediscovered by one explorer.
Yeah.
But this rediscovery, it also brings its own challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely.
How do you preserve a site as fragile and as historically significant as Petra?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It's a constant balancing act. Sharing this wonder with the world.
Right.
But also protecting it from the ravages of time, the elements, and even the impact of tourism.
It's like trying to preserve a delicate flower in a windstorm.
Exactly. Think about the erosion from the wind and rain.
Yeah.
The threat of those flash floods that can sweep through the sick.
Right.
And the impact of thousands of visitors walking through this ancient city every year.
Yeah.
Then you got the challenge of managing tourism so that it benefits the local community, but without, compromising the authenticity and the integrity of the site.
We haven't talked much about the Bedouin tribes, particularly the Badul,
right,
who lived in Petra for centuries before it was rediscovered. What happened to them when Petra became this tourist destination?
It's a complex situation.
Yeah.
It highlights the challenges of balancing progress with cultural preservation. In the 1980s, the Jordanian government, they wanted to manage the growing number of tourists and provide better living conditions.
Right.
So they relocated the Badul from Petra to a nearby settlement called Sehon.
So they were basically moved out of their ancestral home to make way for tourism.
In essence, yes.
Yes.
And while the relocation did give them, running water and electricity, It disrupted their traditional way of life, their connection to the land,
Right.
their role as guardians of Petra's secrets.
It makes you wonder about the true cost of progress.
Yeah.
Whether we're losing something valuable in our quest to modernize and develop.
It's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
And it's one that the Bedouin themselves are grappling with as they navigate this new world, trying to hold on to their traditions,
yeah,
while adapting to a changing society.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and events.
Well,
it's about the lives of people, their experiences,
right,
and the choices they make when faced with change. Speaking of choices, we've talked about architecture and trade, but what about religion?
Yeah.
What role did faith play in Petra? And how did that evolve over time? It seems like every layer we uncover reveals another fascinating part of Petra. I'm especially curious about the religious landscape. We know the Nabateans had their own pantheon, but how did other faiths, like Christianity, find their place in this city?
The religious history of Petra is like a tapestry, woven with threads from all these different cultures and beliefs.
Yeah.
The Nabateans, while they honored their own gods, they were remarkably open to incorporating elements of other faiths.
Right.
This wasn't about conversion.
Oh.
It was more about finding common ground.
Yeah.
Recognizing that shared human desire to connect with something bigger than themselves.
So who were the key players in that Nabatean pantheon? What were their beliefs like?
Well, their primary god was Zushara,
Okay.
a powerful figure, often associated with the mountains and the sky. He represented strength, protection, and guidance.
Right.
Alongside him were three prominent goddesses, Elusa, Alat, and Menat. These weren't just like abstract deities. They were deeply intertwined with the daily lives of the Nabateans.
It's fascinating how their beliefs were so connected to the natural world, the very landscape that shaped their existence.
Exactly. And their reverence for these deities is reflected in the architecture of Petra.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine those elaborate tombs,
right,
carved into the cliffs, not just as like final resting places,
yeah,
but as gateways to the afterlife,
yeah,
adorned with those carvings and inscriptions that honor these gods and goddesses.
It's like their spirituality is woven into the very fabric of the city. I'm also intrigued by the possible connection between Petra's structures and celestial events. I read something about the treasury being aligned with the equinox.
That's right. Recent research suggests that the Nabateans had a pretty sophisticated understanding of astronomy.
Okay.
And incorporated celestial alignments into their architectural designs.
Wow.
The treasury, for example.
Right.
It's positioned in a way that on the equinox, the sunlight illuminates that inner chamber.
Oh, wow.
Creating this dramatic and symbolic spectacle.
So they weren't just master builders and engineers, but they were also keen observers of the heavens.
Yeah.
Integrating their knowledge of the cosmos into their city's design.
Exactly.
It adds another layer of depth and meaning to their accomplishments.
It does. It speaks to their worldview, their belief that the natural world, the heavens, and the divine were all interconnected.
Then we have the arrival of Christianity in the 4th century A.D.
Right.
During the Byzantine era. How did this new faith reshape Petra's religious landscape?
Well, Christianity didn't erase the past.
Right.
It layered itself onto those existing religious traditions.
Okay.
Some of those elaborate Nabatean tombs.
Yeah.
Repurposed as churches. They're huge spaces and symbolic carvings imbued with this new meaning.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, take the urn tomb. With its massive facade and spacious courtyard, it was turned into a church in 446 A.D.
Wow.
A physical manifestation of the changing religious dynamics of Petra.
Yeah.
The monastery high up on a cliff top.
Right.
It also shows evidence of Christian use. Its grandeur and remote location lending itself to that sense of spiritual contemplation.
It's a powerful reminder that history is a process of evolution.
Absolutely.
Adaptation, with each era leaving its mark on the landscape.
Exactly. And that layering of beliefs and traditions is part of what makes Petra so unique.
Yeah.
It's a place where you can trace the footsteps of different civilizations, each one contributing to the richness and complexity of the site.
We've covered so much in this deep dive, from the Nabateans' mastery of the desert to the Romans' influence, the rise of Christianity, and the Bedouin connection to the land. It's been an incredible journey.
It has.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's still so much to learn.
Oh yeah, there's so many mysteries yet to be unraveled.
Before we wrap up, I have one final question for you and for our listener. If the walls of Petra could talk, what stories would they tell?
I imagine they would whisper tales of innovation and resilience, of cultural exchange and adaptation, of faith and spirituality, and of that enduring human desire to leave a mark on the world.
It's a reminder that even the most magnificent structures are ultimately about the people who built them, the lives they lived, and the stories they left behind. To our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring, to delve deeper into the history of Petra, and to draw your own conclusions about this incredible city and its enduring legacy.